here on this podcast by myself today. I didn't have any guests lined up, so I thought I would just come on and have a conversation with myself. But really, I'm having a conversation with you, to whoever is listening, who really is also myself. And that's really what this podcast is all about, is really recognizing the oneness of ourselves, really, through self-exploration and self-recognition. The first thing that came to my mind that I wanted to say was that my son said something to me a few days ago. He said, "Why do we have a shadow?" And I said, well, just answered it as best I could, like I do with all his questions. So I just said, if the sun is shining and if it's not shining on anything, then there's just light. But if it's shining on you, then you're in the way between the sun, the source of light, and the ground. So where the shadow is, the sun didn't reach there. So that's why there's a shadow. If you're there, there'll always be a shadow. And when I said that, I was like, oh, I felt like it's very apt for spirituality. Because as long as we are there as an ego or a separate individual, then there will seemingly be a shadow aspect of ourselves. And I feel like that's what this exploration is. And when I say this exploration, I suppose I really mean life. Life is an exploration. Like, what does it mean to be human? And when we're here, how can we be as peaceful as possible? And, we don't all believe or think we're on an exploration, perhaps. But I feel like it's the same for all of us, no matter what field we're in or what kind of we're interested in. Everybody, we're all looking really to be happy and to be peaceful. And of course, I know these are just like the basic things, but this is just what's going on. So yeah, we seek for happiness usually in external things. So it could be through our work, or through things that we acquire, or through our money, or through our relationships. But we find that doesn't really lead to happiness. So then some of us, probably anybody who's listening to this podcast, myself included, we get brought into, life brings us or leads us into spirituality. And there's many different types of spirituality, but the type of spiritual path that I got drawn into, I suppose, was non-duality. And non-duality is where we explore really our true nature, through maybe many different ways, but through self-inquiry and not only that, but also the spirituality of kind of healing, so even when we get brought down the path of non-duality, self-inquiry, like, who am I without my story? Who am I without this relationship? Who am I without this job, without this label, without this idea of myself as a mother, as a woman, as a man, as a brother, a sister, really ultimately as a body? And the only way we can answer that question, really, or the only way we can even seek for the answer, is not through words and not through ideas and not through the mind, but the only way we can seek that answer for that question, or really, really look, is to stop looking to ideas for the answer. So that means being really open inside ourselves to what we will actually see, what will our actual direct experience be. Well, really, once we discover that truth, for lack of better words, really, once we just kind of stop looking to ideas for who we are and experience what's here and really see not even what's here, but what's knowing that we're here, what's aware of what's here, even though it's not different. What's aware of what's here and what's here are one. So what's aware is I, and what's here is I am, my presence. So we come to that, and it can be a great relief, like But somehow for most people, what seems to happen is nothing. Nothing really happens. It's just a recognition. So that means everything that was in the life before is still in the life. Meaning maybe like our inner life, so our conditioning, even our ideas, our ego ideas, even after that recognition, our ego ideas can appear again. So it might be, could be 1 minute later after that recognition, or it could be 1 day or 1 year. But often for many of us, those ideas appear again. So then that kind of comes back around then to that idea of our shadow self. Well, that's one word that you could say, our shadow self. I'm sure there's many other ways of framing that idea, but that is there even within, well, kind of within the idea of non-duality, but in many aspects of spirituality and healing. But actually, what we recognize, or what I want to share with you, is that, I suppose, in the recognition of ourself, really that there is no shadow self. Because it can seem like that, okay, I'm recognizing the truth of who I am. I'm recognizing that there is no two. And this, what I've believed myself, this body mind, is not what I am. But then when we kind of stop that really focused looking, and life continues, like in the sense that we go about our day, it can seem like something arises that we might label as our shadow self, or our ego, or our conditioning, or someone I was talking to recently called it mechanisms. So you can really kind of call it anything. But yeah, the point is, what I said to my son. So I said that once you're there, there will be a shadow. And I just felt like that's amazing, because once you're there as a belief, once you believe yourself to be a separate individual, a separate identity, separate from light, then there will seem also to be a shadow. Whereas when we're taking ourselves to be the light itself, it's not that something doesn't arise. It's just that we get more wise, you could say, about labeling things, because we see that those labels aren't accurate. So those labels don't come from our heart. They don't come from the light that we are. Labels for things such as the shadow self, or any label at all, comes from the mind. And of course, it's a natural thing in the world. The mind wants to label everything and make everything different. But when we're inquiring in this way and looking and recognizing ourselves as really light or the source of light, then there can't really be a shadow self, because that's making something separate from you. So how we might look at, or how another way of looking at when something arises, because it's still going to be the same. Like I said, nothing really changes when you recognize that we are the source of this light. Nothing changes in reality, like it really, in our really direct experience, except we stop labeling. So perhaps when we go about our day and something arises that perhaps in the past we have labeled as conditioning, now if we remain, or when we remain as the light or the source of the light that we are, whatever arises really is also the light. But it's not seen to be different. You know, if we really slow down, we might experience a certain type of energy within us that might feel challenging to experience, or when we had labeled it in the past and taken it to be ourself or even our shadow self, but in some way identifying it as part of ourselves, but really it's our separate self. And when we label it like that, well, it's really making something that's not there. So when we go about our day and something seems to arise, when we remain in our light, then this energy that seems to arise is just allowed to come and go. So really, it's just like Ananta says, open and empty. So I was speaking with him on a podcast recently, and I was asking him to clarify what open and empty means. And really, it sounded like what he means is that it's another way of saying to let everything come and go. And that's what happens naturally when we remain as we are. And also when we don't kind of step in there as an idea of I am this, we also recognize what we truly are. But the whole point of this was that there isn't really a shadow self. There's nothing to resolve, you know, because I think in many fields of spirituality, it can be, or it can seem like that there is something that needs to be resolved. And I feel like it's tied in with the idea of embodiment. So I've recognized this truth or this reality that really what I am is not an object. It's nothing solid. It's not separate. It's the subject. Even to say it's a subject isn't right. So to then say that we need to bring this in, we need to bring this into life. That's the idea of embodiment. But I think it is something to explore. Like in a way, one person can say, even one spiritual teacher can say, no, there's no such thing as embodiment. And we can say, oh yeah, that makes total sense. And another equally respected teacher can say, oh, embodiment is very important. We can say, yeah, and see the truth in that. So in a way, they're really both ideas. And I guess the idea of like there's no such thing is quite good because it allows us to let go of the idea and then everything just is as it is. But where there could be an argument with that is when we're just allowing everything to be as it is. We can't help but to recognize the flow within consciousness and life, which is not separate from what I am. And there does seem to be an embodiment taking place. And what that means is that light of being, that light is no longer being restricted from flowing into the life. And what restricts that flow in the life, or what seems to restrict that flow, really is labels and interpretation and control and really a belief in separation. So as long as you are there as an idea, meaning that you believe yourself to be a separate individual, then there will be a shadow self, because when something arises, you'll feel like it's in you and it's something I need to get rid of. Whereas when you really don't take yourself to be anything at all and you remain as you truly are, then anything that arises is an extension. It's really an extension of that light that you are, and that light, well, this isn't really true, but that light penetrates it, but it's also made of it. We actually see that it's made of it. And I can feel that when I'm speaking, the words don't really do it. But the thing is, the words will never do it, because no idea can really touch reality. Yet we do use ideas to try to express ideas, or we use ideas in, I guess mostly we use ideas to try to understand things. But the whole point, I feel, of really this podcast and this type of conversation is to be reminded that it's okay to come out of ideas, and that ideas aren't really needed to just be ourselves. So I suppose that's what I was bringing here today, was that idea of a shadow self, and also the idea of embodiment. And in a way, at least in how the exploration has been here so far, is that they very much go together. The idea of a shadow self and embodiment. Because to embody, let's say to embody this life with the truth or something, that as an idea, like how would you do that? You would have to, so there's, within this human expression, there's shadow, let's say. There's a shadow self, and we want to bring our light to it so there can be more light shining within the human. So that's one idea. But the other idea is that there is no shadow self at all, and that there's only this light. And even though sometimes I am kind of drawn towards the idea of embodiment, and bringing my light to the shadow self, it actually feels much more light and joyous. And also, well, you can't really say it's more true because nothing is true, but let's say it anyway. So it's more true to say that there really is no shadow self. How can there be a shadow self if there's no self in that way at all? And that's what non-duality or Advaita teachings or I don't really know. I'm not familiar with all the different types of spiritual teachings, but many spiritual teachings are pointing to what's beyond the individual self. And that doesn't mean that there's an individual self and there's something beyond it. It means that there really is no individual self at all. Like that has just been an idea. So if that's just been an idea, all aspects of that idea are untrue. So whether it's the shadow aspect or the joyous aspect, they're both equally as untrue as each other. And to hold it as an idea at the same time as believing that we recognize our true nature is trying to find a word, like ridiculous. I don't know, I could have better words, but it really doesn't make sense at all. But when we drop those ideas of having to bring our light to our shadow self, the thing is, it could happen anyway. You know, we don't really the thing is, we really don't know what's happening. We don't know what's happening, and that's the whole point. It's like this world seems to appear and we don't know what it is, because when we remain as we are, we don't really know anything. And the reason why we don't know anything is because we really don't need to know anything, because there's nothing to know. There's only myself. So therefore, there's no inherent need within myself to know anything. Yet, when it seems like we're in the world and it seems like really when we take ourselves to be the body, then what arises simultaneously with that is really that aspect of the mind that wants to understand things, that wants to label things, that wants to know things and to know what this means, what this is for, all of that. Yet, yeah, when I remain in not knowing, we really just don't know what's happening. So yes, like it does seem like you can focus in on a part of life and say, this is what's happening. And that's why many things can make sense to our human minds, like the idea of a shadow self or the idea of healing or the idea of evolving towards or the idea of embodiment, because we can see these kind of things seeming to happen when we kind of zoom in and our mind wants to label and say, this is what's happened, this is what's happened. But really, the invitation, how I feel the invitation of my own teacher, both Muji and Ananta, I feel like their invitation over and over again is to just remain in this not knowing. And it can seem like at a certain point, it can seem like we're returning to, like, so I have been this and I'm returning to not knowing, or I'm returning to self-knowledge. But really, we're not even returning to, we're just remaining as. And that's the invitation. And just on a real practical level, that really just means not labeling and not taking any idea to be true. So whether there's no such thing as the shadow self, or there is such thing as the shadow self, or there's no such thing as this, or there is such thing as this, it's like, yes, you could look and see, okay, this is true and that's true, or both are true, or neither are true. But all of that belongs to the mind, and it belongs to an idea. And the invitation of our spiritual guides really is to remain as the heart, to remain as not knowing, remain as the source of all, remain as the light of this world. And I do feel like really that's really the only place, if you can call it a place, where we really find peace. And even though it might seem like someone who is behaving as a guide in the world, like I can talk about Muji and Ananta because they're my teachers, so I'm not familiar with all the spiritual teachers, obviously. But they might appear to be engaging in world stories, and they might appear to be engaging in ideas. Yet you could say, like, inwardly, they're not really. And it's really because even these words aren't right. There's really, you could say there's like two things, but there's like heart and mind. So in the world of mind, which is everything, in the world of mind, which is everything that we see, then there seems to be labels and discussion. But really, in our heart, we see that all of that is irrelevant. And because all of it is irrelevant, all of it is allowed. Is that? And somehow it's impossible to express what's really in a heart, or what we really experience in our heart, or what the insight of the heart is. Somehow that's not possible. Yet it is very possible for each of us to directly experience that, directly engage with it, or directly be it, really, because it's what we are. So of course it's possible. But yet words don't go there. Words are in a different category altogether. And sometimes they can seem to align. But really, the invitation is to just remain as you are and leave the mind, leave ideas, no matter what it is. And sometimes, if engaging with ideas seems to happen, there's a deeper recognition that that's not happening within you remaining as you are. So you are remaining as you are, and that engagement with the mind and the engagement with ideas is happening simultaneously. But you know it doesn't mean anything about you. because I think that's the only thing that seems to happen, is that we get totally caught up in ideas. We get totally caught up in the world, and we kind of we really just allow an idea of ourselves to get tangled in the world. So really it's better to just have no idea of ourselves or anything. It really comes back to that again and again and again. No ideas, no ideas, no ideas. No ideas, no ideas, no ideas. Inwardly. And it really doesn't matter how you express outwardly. You could be a teacher of ideas, and inwardly you're free of ideas. So, yeah, I can't think of anything else that I'd like to speak about today. That's what's here. And it seems like I can talk a lot, even when I'm not in conversation with someone. So, but I was really in conversation with you. I was speaking with you. And I'm not saying anything new or different. And really, my purpose for speaking is really inwardly, it's that I really don't know. Of course. But also, it's just in a way to kind of affirm and confirm, and for the joy of sharing. And in a way, I'm really sharing it with myself, you know, not in an esoteric way, like you're myself, even though you are myself, but just like all parts of myself, my being, like how I experience my being. The message of unity is reaching through all aspects of consciousness, and wherever that might land is God's plan. And if you feel like engaging with this conversation, please write comments or reviews, or you can also send me a message through my Instagram, or you can also send me an email via my website, ambalovecoaching.com. Or I think you might be able to, through this podcast, if you leave a review, you can write any kind of comment that you feel to engage with this conversation if you would like. Or any other way that you feel like you would like to engage. You're most welcome. So thank you for listening, and hopefully next time I will have a guest again, and it won't just be me speaking the whole time. Although I have to say I did really enjoy speaking with myself today. Okay, thank you. Bye.